What do the following names have in common, and how are they related? So I'm going to just list these here. The times of the Gentiles, the term Babel, Babylon, daughter of Babylon, mystery of Babylon, New World Order, United Nations, GoG and MaGoG. Actually, GoG and MaGoG could be just one together. They really should be together. But as you look at this, you know, it's times of the Gentiles. Well, what is that? And of course, we know what Babel is. The Tower of Babel. What was the Tower of Babel? The Tower of Babel was a place where all the world came together, and they were one language. And they were going to build a structure, a physical structure, unto God. What was God's response to that? He destroyed the Tower of Babel, and he confused the languages. So what should that tell us? That when the nations of the world can come together and they're one, it's not good. It's not a good thing. Otherwise, God would not have destroyed it and prevented it. It's because when we get together and we're one voice, one world, we act like God. We behave like God. And of course, there was one Nimrod who was at the head of all that. And what if we were to look at Nimrod in relationship to GoG and MaGoG? Nimrod is GoG, and the Tower of Babel, and the nation that was coming together, is MaGoG. It would, because it does fit. That's exactly what it is, except that it's just another form of it. And so, in the times of the Gentiles, we're going to look at some passages in the book of Luke. We're going to see, and in the book of Romans, where this term is. And what we're going to see about all those names there, it's really all referring to the same thing. Every one of them is all the same thing. It's just a different aspect of the same thing, a world system. A world system that is deceived and godless. And unfortunately, that has been the system that has ruled the world all this time. But it's going to come to an end. And in Luke's passage, we read about where we find the times of the phrase "the times of the Gentiles." You can see that right down here. I have it underlined. In verse 20, quite honestly, is a prophecy concerning the fall of Jerusalem, and this happened in 70 A.D. You know, when you'll see Jerusalem compassed about with armies, and no desolation and thereof is nigh. But then it drops down to verse number 24, and they shall fall by the edge of the sword and shall be led away captive unto all nations. Now, we know from history that was fulfilled. We know in 7 A.D. Israel was dispersed. It's called the diaspora, the spreading about, and they were spread to every nation. But there's a key word here, and I have it in purple, okay? And it says until. Now, what does the word until mean to you? Now, I want you to sit here until 6:40 and not move. So what does that mean when 6:40 hits? You're not free to move, right? So the until has a limit. It sets a limit, all right? It sets a limit, and so when you see the word there until, it means that there's going to be an end. And what this passage is saying is that Israel is going to be led captive to all nations, and Jerusalem will be trodden down of the Gentiles. Now, the idea of trodden down of the Gentiles means underfoot. And from what we know of the Middle East, the terminology of being underfoot is being under control, being under your feet. And so as we look at this, what the Word of God is telling us that there's going to come a time when Israel is going to be taken captive, dispersed to all nations, and Jerusalem is going to be controlled by the Gentiles. Not Jews, not Zionism, but by Gentiles. And this is going to continue until the times of the Gentiles is fulfilled. All right? So is Israel being undispersed right now from the rest of the nations of the world and coming to the land of Israel? Is Israel a nation again? Yeah. And so what we're seeing here is that the until seems to be approaching. And so what you have here, you only have two world systems. One is the current world system, all right? Gentile rule of the world, and Zionism. Or, let me put it this way, a time when Messiah rules, not man. That's when I refer to Zionism, I refer to Messiah is here and Messiah rules. Not that the Jews rule, But Messiah, the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, the Prince of Peace, and all those who believe and trust him, Jew and Gentile, rule and reign on the earth with him. So there's only two. There's only two kingdoms, if you would, that rule the world. And right now, nations in the world are vying for the top dog, all right, to rule all the other nations of the world. But behind that, what we're going to see is the devil. All right, the devil's really behind it all. Why is there war? Because there's a devil. Why is there so much lies and half-truths and innuendo and deception? Because there's a devil. That's what we have to understand. There is a devil, and he's at work, and he's the one that is deceiving the nations, and we'll see that. The verse afterwards, verse 25, I believe are important because it tells us that concerning this time, or the approach until the time, how do we know we're coming to the place where the until is no longer in force? Well, that's what follows. There'll be signs in the sun and the moon and the stars, upon the earth distress of nations, with perplexity sea waves roaring, men's hearts failing for fear of the power of looking after those things which are coming upon the earth. We're there. We're exactly there. The only thing left is for the powers of heaven to be shaken. And that's going to be the last phase when the powers of heaven, the system that God has set up, is going to be shaken. And it's the shaking of that system, the world being turned upside down, inside out, the moon being turned to blood red, and the earth being dark, and the sun being darkened. God's going to bring darkness to the kingdoms of the world for the final judgment. That's the only thing that is left in that particular passage. Also in Romans chapter 11, which is a very interesting passage. For I would not have you to be ignorant, brethren, concerning the mystery, lest you should be wise in your own conceits, that blindness is in part happened to Israel. Notice that word again. Until the fullness of the Gentiles be come in. Why is it that so many Jews don't believe in Jesus Christ? Why are they blind to who he is? Well, it's because blindness has happened, but it won't be forever. It's until the times of the Gentiles come in. All right? The fullness of the Gentiles comes. So it's completed. And so we see these two verses that Gentile rule of the world is limited. There's a limitation on it. And it has to do when God is going to come to set up the kingdom, and the Messiah is going to rule from Zion. Now, in Daniel chapter 2, to prove this point, all right, I want to show you something so that we understand just what Babylon, the mystery of Babylon, GoG, MaGoG, and times of Gentile rule is really talking about a system, a world system. And the world system has political, it has military, and it has religious elements to it. You name the country. And the country, even if it's a godless country, there's an ideology, a philosophy at the very heart of it. What is communism, Nazism, right, or even atheism for that matter, or whether it's Islam or Judaism or Christianity, and then there's the political side of it, and then there's the military side of it, right? And that makes up the kingdoms of the world. You can't have a kingdom, a ruling kingdom, without those three elements in it. And so in Babylon, in Babel, in the GoG and MaGoG and all of that, you're going to see it in the world system, the mystery of Babylon, you're going to see it, but it's all referring to the same system, just a different aspect of it. In the vision here that Daniel was given, now we've all seen the pictures of the statue. Now, when you look at the statue, we know that from this, and what Daniel is telling King Nebuchadnezzar, now King Nebuchadnezzar is the king of Babylon. And this is what confuses people. There was a nation called Babylon. So when we see Babylon in the Bible, we think of the nation of Babylon. Babylon is more than that. Babylon is in the Bible is used in different ways. For example, when I say New York, what are you thinking? Is it New York City or is it New York State? Same name. But unless you say New York City, or unless you say the state of New York, you're not going to distinguish the two of them apart. So whether I say Babel, or Babylon, or daughter of Babylon, or mystery of Babylon, I'm really referring to just different aspects of the same entity. Thou art this head of gold. Notice what he says to King Nebuchadnezzar. Of this image, you are the head of gold. That is your kingdom. But he goes on and he describes another kingdom that will rise after you, but it'll be inferior. That's why it's made of silver, right? And a third kingdom, which was the Grecian Empire. The one before it was the Medes and the Persians, right? The kingdom is of brass and will bear rule, see this, over all the earth. Now, it's not the geographical earth, but it's the most powerful kingdom that the world, they're in control. What they say goes. And so this is what these different aspects of these different parts of one statue represent are different kings that rule at different times in history. All right? And then the fourth one, look at this. And the fourth kingdom, see that? Shall be strong and it'll break in pieces and subdue all things. And he goes on here to talk about the clay and the iron and be divided into kingdoms and all that. And then you get down to the toes of the feet where they're part of iron and clay. So the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken, whereas thou sawest the iron mixed with clay. They shall mingle themselves with the seed of man, but they shall not cleave one to another. Right? And so the thing that we have to picture then is that there's this one image. But this one image has different parts, different aspects to it. It's all Gentile. It's all Gentile rule. It's nothing to do with the Jews. Right? And so it's one thing. And this is Babylon. That is a world system. It is the mystery of Babylon. It has religion. It is Gentile rule. It is a system, a godless system, a system that is influenced and controlled and deceived by the devil himself. And we'll see that in Isaiah chapter 14. But here's the good news. In verse 44, we see, and in the days of these kings, meaning the 10 toes, right? God shall set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it will stand forever. There, in essence, is Zionism. There is the messianic rule when the Lord Jesus Christ will return. And what's interesting about the imagery here is that he saw a stone cut out without mountains, without hands, and it break in pieces. Notice it starts with the iron, and then it goes to the brass, the clay, and the silver, and then finally the gold. So this stone cut out without hands is the coming of the Messiah, and that he's going to destroy that kingdom. It's going to hit at the feet, but it destroys that whole system that goes all the way back to Babel, if you would. It's a one-world system. It's a godless one-world system. And so that's what this, God has made known to the king, which shall come to pass hereafter. The dream is certain, and the interpretation is absolutely sure. Now, what's interesting is what we see in Isaiah chapter 47. We see this term, O virgin daughter of Babylon. Who's the daughter of Babylon? Well, anybody who has a daughter, you're talking family. The daughter of, you're talking family. You're talking about the offspring of someone who came before, the parents who came before. So the daughter of Babylon means the offspring of Babylon. Babylon has children. The world system that we see produces other kingdoms, and the devil is really behind it all. And he goes on here and he said, sit down on the ground, there is no throne, O daughter of the Chaldeans. And the daughter of the Chaldeans is the same thing as the daughter of Babylon. But the daughter of the Chaldeans is making a reference to the religious side of things. The Chaldean priests were astronomers, and they were priests. They were religious people. And they were at the very heart. But they couldn't interpret the dream for King Nebuchadnezzar. They had to go to Daniel, who had the Spirit of God guiding him. For thou shalt no more be called tender and delicate. And he goes on to talk about this judgment. This millstone will be tied tied to her, and her nakedness will be uncovered. We see that in verse number 3. And he says, I will take vengeance, and I will not meet thee as a man. As for our Redeemer, the Lord of hosts is his name, the Holy One of Israel. Sit thou and be silent, and get thee into darkness, O daughter of the Chaldeans, for thou shalt no be called the Lady of Kingdoms. The lady or the woman. And what's interesting is that when you go into the book of Revelation, and you see this woman, the mystery woman, in Revelation chapter 17, in Revelation chapter 8, the mystery of Babylon, this woman who's riding a beast. In Revelation 12, you see Israel referred to as a woman. So you have these two women going to battle, right? And but the depiction there is this idea of rule. And the lady of the Chaldeans is this empire which is represented and is cared for, and the kings of the earth we're going to see commit fornication and all that with her. And he goes on to say here in verse 6, I was wroth, I was angry with my people. They have polluted my inheritance and have given them into thine hand, and thou shouldst show them no mercy upon the ancients, hast thou very heavily laid thy yoke. So God has used the nations of the world, the Gentile nations of the world, to discipline the nation of Israel. He does the same thing with other nations as well. He raises nations up and he takes nations down, but ultimately behind that, there's a lot of deception going on with the devil. And then further on in chapter 2 or chapter 47 of Isaiah, there's this passage which says, thou hast said, I shall be a lady forever, so thou did not lay these things to heart, neither didst thou remember the latter end of it. All right? The until part. See, the latter end. There's going to be an end to the rules of the Gentiles. You didn't consider the latter end of it, but there's going to come a day when this world system, which is a Gentile system, is going to be dealt asunder. And what have they said in their heart? I am and none else beside me. No, there's no God. There's no accountability. There's just me. All right? I shall not sit as a widow, neither shall I know the loss of children. But these two things shall come upon thee in a moment, and one day the loss of children and thy widowhood. They shall come upon thee in their perfection for the multitude of thy sorceries, and the great abundance of thine enchantments. For thou hast trusted in thy wickedness, thou hast said, none see me, thy wisdom and thy knowledge, it had perverted thee. And thou hast said in thy heart, I am, and none else besides me. That describes perfectly our world system, our secular world system, with evolution at the very core, and now climate change. It's a new religion, that's at the core of that. It's godless. Therefore shall evil come upon thee, thou shalt not know from whence it, and mischief shall fall upon thee, thou shalt not be able to put it off. Now, what's interesting in this passage is what this woman says. I am and none else beside me. I shall not sit as a widow, neither shall I know the loss of children. So it thinks it'll last forever and forever. Like a lot of people think that the United States will stand forever and ever. Of course, everybody thinks that their nation will stand forever, but history tells us something different. Now, when you go to Revelation chapter 17, we see this, is that there's this woman, and she sits on many waters. And the idea of many waters in the book of Revelations is many nations, many shorelines. She's all over the world. She fills the four corners of the earth. And then, so there's this, I will show ye the judgment of the great whore, right? With whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth had been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. So he carried me away in the spill in the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast. That's the devil. That's satanic. All right? The devil's behind it all. Full of the names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. Now, the 7 heads of the 10 horns are the last phase of this statue that's in Daniel chapter 2. The 7 heads and 10 horns are the last 2 phases of the kingdoms of the Gentiles. And those kingdoms come to power in the 7 years of tribulation, or just prior to that. The 10 horns have power in the last half of the tribulation. And so, of course, that's what is taking place here. The woman is arrayed with purple and scarlet, showing both religious and royalty, decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand, full of abominations and filthiness and fornications. And upon her was written a name, Mystery of Babylon. So what is this mystery of Babylon? Well, the mystery of Babylon is the religious. It's at the core. It's at the heart. It's the beliefs. Why did the Pope come to the United Nations and speak on climate change to the nations of the world? Because the Roman Catholic Church is part of the world system. It wants to be at the very heart. The Vatican is a government. It's part of the world system. All the religions that are not biblical are part of that world, the world system. All right? And so this mystery of Babylon, it shows how religion, the mystique, the mystery, the superstition, the fables, and all this stuff, and climate change, how you need something to unify people. And that's where religion comes in. Even the UN understands that. But the problem with all the religions of the world is hard to get people to give up their religion. So what do? You create something else. That's what climate change is. And then the climate change has its own apocalypse. And people need to sacrifice for the good of the earth. And that's why climate change is so important to the UN. Climate change is important to people who have a vision of controlling the whole world. So be careful of those who are pushing climate change, because the real agenda is world domination and control of the masses. Because at the very heart of it is that mystery, that mystique. Climate change is the biggest hoax ever perpetrated upon the nations of the world. And so he says this woman drunken with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. So we know right away there's a direct conflict between the true saints of God and these other religions, this mystery religion of Babylon. And as a result of that, her judgment is going to come. And look what it says further on in chapter 18. There's an announcement. And see, this is after the seventh trumpet is sounded. At the end of the book of Revelation, it says, this angel cries out, Babylon the Great is fallen. What's fallen? Well, is it the nation of Babylon? Is it a city? Is it Rome? Is it Brussels? No, Babylon the Great. This image that was Nebuchadnezzar, the Medes and the Persians, this whole system with religion at the heart of it and riding the beast is fallen. It's been destroyed. God has destroyed it. And it's what is it? It has become the habitation of devils. See that? Demons. It is the hold of every foul spirit. It was a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. Personally, I think he's describing the United Nations as I see it. For all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth are waxed rich to the abundance of her delicacies. There's a tiff now going between Turkey and Russia. Turkey shot down an aircraft, a Russian aircraft. What was Putin's response? It was economic. It's merchandise. Or merchants, visas, travel, money, right? So he's going to hurt Turkey financially. It's a form of control. And so merchants, kings of the earth, submit to those that are able to control, to pull those strings. What did we do to Iran? The sanctions. It's a way of punishment. And it's this mentality that if you don't play ball, if you don't do what we tell you to do, then we're going to hurt you financially, is where this leads to ultimately, where unless you take the mark of the beast, you're not going to be able to buy or sell. Today we're worried about refugees coming in, and what's the big problem? Well, you can't vet them. You know what the solution is? Everybody gets a mark. Everybody will take a mark in the system, and if you don't get the mark, well, you can't buy. You can't sell. That's where this is leading to, all right? Verse number 4, and I heard the voice from heaven say, come out of her, my people, and be not partakers of her sin. So Christians, as Christian believers, we're in the world. We're part of the world system, but we're not of the world. And receive not of her plagues. And so I believe the rapture is going to take place, and God is going to snatch out his people before the final judgment. And God had remembered her iniquities. And look what he says, reward her even as she rewarded you, and double unto her double according to her works in the cup she had filled to double. how much she has glorified herself and lived deliciously, so much torment and sorrow. And look at what he says here. For she said in her heart, I sit as a queen, I am no widow, I will see no sorrows. That's exactly what it says of the daughter of Babylon in Isaiah chapter 46. So here it's going to be fulfilled in Revelation 18. So it tells me that in Isaiah, he's speaking to a system that exists, and it's existed since the Tower of Babel, and it existed during the time of Daniel's stay there. It was the king of Babylon, the Medes, the Persians, the Greeks, the Romans. And then finally, that breaks in pieces, it consumes the whole world, and that's our world that we're living in right now. And the system is going to be destroyed. And the things that we're seeing in the Middle East are pointing to that. And so all these terms are really related to one another. And then finally, in Revelation chapter 20, verse 7 and 8, after 1,000 years, and I'll tell you, I read this passage and I really meditated on this, and I thought, there's no hope for the kingdoms of the world. People don't get it. Christians don't even get it. You know, everybody's proceeding and pretending like, it's just going to keep on going. Nothing really bad is going to happen, because it's never happened. Well, I think it's coming, and it's coming real soon to the world. It says here, then after 1,000 years. Now this is after Christ has been on earth for 1,000 years. He's ruled and reigned. Babylon has been destroyed. The world system has been destroyed, and God's kingdom has been set up. And at the end of that 1,000 years, the devil is going to be loose. So for 1,000 years, the devil is not deceiving anyone. For 1,000 years. And he shall go and deceive the nations which are where? The four corners of the earth, GoG and MaGoG. So if you want to know who GoG and MaGoG is, GoG is the leader of MaGoG, the king of MaGoG, but MaGoG is the nations of the world. It's in the four corners. It's the Gentile nations. So MaGoG is just another term for the Gentile nations of the world. That's all it really is. And GoG, though, represents, and quite honestly, I'm going to show you something here. This truly represents the king of Babel. All right? The king, the head. Nebuchadnezzar was the king of Babylon. He was the head. He was the king. He was GoG. That's who he was. And see, who is GoG? GoG is whoever heads up and leads the nations of the world. It's a world ruler. It's not the Antichrist. He's different from the Antichrist. All right? And this has to do with, see, GoG is not going to be supernaturally indwelled by devil. He's influenced by the devil, but he's not possessed by the devil. He's deceived by the devil, but he's not the devil personified. That's the Antichrist. GoG is different. All right? But in the end, and during this battle, GoG is going to be Satan himself. Because look at here. To gather them to battle, the number of whom is as the sand of the sea. And that's what Satan is going to do. Satan's loosed out of the prison. It's interesting, you go to Isaiah chapter 14, verse 12. And Isaiah makes reference to this final judgment and how Satan, Lucifer, is cut down and he has become weak even as we are, as the men are, in the sides of the pit in hell. He lifts up his eyes. And the people in hell looked at him and says, how art thou fallen? And you've become weak as we are. But in this condemnation of him, it says, how art thou cut down to the ground, which did weaken the nations? And so the situation and the deception and everything else we have in the world right now, in the kingdoms of the Gentiles, is that the nations are being deceived and they don't even know it. And what is it all for? It's a quest for power. It's a quest for control. What the problem is that there are people, leaders, kings of the world, that think they can rule the world without the true God of heaven, without acknowledging him. And that's why we have wars, and rumors of wars, and famines, and pestilence, and all of that. And so, GoG and MaGoG, I want to show you where this comes from. In the Hebrew, the vowels are really not in the Hebrew language. The vowels are added. In fact, you go to Israel, you can find some signs and some things there where there's no vowel pointing. And as, you know, I need the vowel pointing because I'm not that astute in the Hebrew language that I can say, okay, that should be this and that, but as you know what the language, the language and you're very familiar with it, you don't need the vowels to really see it. You're just the consonants. You can do that with the English language. Take out all the vowels and you can still read it, all right? Well, in the Hebrew, it's the same way, all right? And so GoG and MaGoG is really a code. Daniel wrote this when he was in Babylon. And so, and what's interesting in the Hebrew alphabet, and I'm going to put that up here, but that in the Hebrew alphabet, it's not A, B, C. It's Alpha, Bet, Gimel, Daleth, all right? There's no C. There's the G sound. The G sound follows the B. And also in the LMN, RLMM, the Lamed, Main, and Nun of the Hebrew, the L precedes the M. So what Daniel did is he just took the words for Babel, the initial, the Bates, and put in the next letter, G, all right? And for the L, he put in the Mem. And so what he was writing was Babel. King of Babylon, king of Babel. Babel, king of Babel, is what he was actually, that's what GoG and MaGoG refers to as Babel and the king of Babel, or the kingdom of Babel. The M, a lot of believe that was used also to signify the letter for king. Melech is the word for king in the Hebrew. And so GoG and MaGoG is just another reference to Babel. And the leader of Babel, which is GoG, all right? That we refer to him as GoG. Now, I want to show you something. These are some videos that I took from a fellow down in Australia, and his website, his organization is the ChristianDelphianVideo.org. And I screen captured these. And you've probably been hearing a lot about Sykes-Picot. And of course, Sykes-Picot was instituted by the British after World War I, and it was finalized after World War II, with everything. But Sykes-Picot was put into place, and it divided up the land. And you can see here's the land of Syria, here's Jerusalem, the so-called area of Palestine, Transjordan, Iraq, and over here is Iran. Now, this is a map. And what I want to do with all this is I want you to understand what's going on and what the problem is. You need to understand. And when you see this, it's like you're going to come away and say, this is bad. This is really, really bad what's going on over there. And but as you look at, now what you need to pay attention here, see this red line? This is Iraq. Now the colors represent the different mysteries of Babylon, right? The religious beliefs. In the orange, you got the Kurds. In the blue, you got the Sunni. And in the green, you got the Shia. Now, if you look at Iraq, what do you have? You have the white, basically, let's say that represents Christians. All right, that's really not representative of the space, though, in desert land. But you have Sunni, Shia, and Kurds. That's a formula for disaster. There is no way that this country is ever going to be able to long-term survive with that type of makeup. And what has been the result? Of course, Saddam Hussein came in and he ruled with an iron fist. And because of that, he was able to kind of keep the peace, so to speak. Well, not really. But who went to war against each other? Iraq versus Iran. I think there was over 1 million killed in that war. Well, why did they go to war? Because Iran is Shia, and Iraq, the Sunnis, controlled that area. Saddam was of the Ba'ath Party. And so the Sunnis were controlling. The Sunnis were in control. And the Sunnis, to stay in control, have to be absolutely barbarous. And because people will respect that, the bully. And because their numbers are smaller, they did that. But what happened after the United States came into there was very interesting. Then after the United States came in case you see, the United States came into Iraq and became the Afghanistan, and who's in the middle? Iran. And so what's Iran thinking? It's like, ooh, they're on our two flanks here, the east and west flanks of Iran. But the problem is that, see, in Iran's mind, and the Medes and the Persians, that they have this vision. And there is that here's Iran, and Iran at one time controlled all this area. And of course, notice over here is Saudi Arabia. Now, Saudi Arabia is Sunni. Saudi Arabia has been exporting Wahhabism, a form which is part of the Sunni religion, all over the world. And so Iran, this is why Saudi Arabia is fearful of Iran. Because Iran is Shia, and Iran wants to dominate in this part of the world. The only problem is now you got Sunnis, ISIS, who want the caliphate, who wants to control the same area of the world. And so what we see here is that, see, the green represents Shia power, and the blue represents Sunni power. So the ISIS is Sunni. And so what has happened that since 2003, all right, and afterwards, actually since 2008, is that when the United States went into Iraq, they set up what? A democracy. So in a democracy, who wins? The majority. So what's the majority in that area? It's Shia, not Sunni. So the Sunnis are thrown out of power. The Shias are in power. So what the United States did is created a Shia corridor in this area. And Iran saw that and says, we're going to keep that. Thank you, Obama, for pulling out. And who came in right after we pulled out was Iran. Why? Because they're Shia. And they see an opportunity here for this. And that's what they're after. Now, what's interesting about this is that as you go on and you look at this, now the rise of ISIS, this area in red is the area that ISIS is controlling right now. Good part of Syria, here's the Turkey border. This is where the aircraft was shot down. Actually, in this area right here is where the aircraft was shot down. They control all these different areas. The Kurds are up in here. They're sandwiched between Turkey, who hates them, and they're a threat because Turkey is Sunni. ISIS is Sunni. Russia is helping Iran, which is Shia. Why was the Russian plane shot down? It was shot down because the Sunnis are one. And the thing of it is the United States has been funneling weapons into the hands of Sunnis, whether it be Hezbollah or the Mujahideen. They're all Sunni. Yeah, but they're against ISIS. They're just fighting for control is what they're doing, but they're all Sunni. This happened on August 31st. It was recorded, your throne is being threatened by us. That's ISIS. ISIS sends a warning to Russia, Putin. Is the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria now targeting Russia and President Vladimir Putin? In a video obtained by Israel National News, ISIS fighters at the Syrian military base they took over warned Russia that they will liberate their lands. Vladimir Putin, these are the Russian planes that you sent to Bashar. Allah willing, we will take them back to your own turf and liberate Chechnya, the Caucasus. Allah willing, your throne is being threatened by us, the militant said in the video dated August 31st. And what did ISIS do? They shot down a Russian airliner. They bombed it and brought it down. You see what's going on here? There's a real vying for the king of Babylon, the head rule. ISIS announces new plans to conquer Rome as well, following the capture of the air base near Syria, Sirte in Libya. On May 29th, the Islamic State renewed its threats to attack against the Italian capital by air, right across the Mediterranean, right over into Italy. they're going to cross. They want to conquer. And of course, what's happening on the ground right now in France in that area is ISIS is making the moves. This is just the winds of war, an individual economist saying 2016, 2020, it's coming. New war is coming. Why? Unstoppable forces vitally guarantee an explosion of huge civil, regional, international wars over the next 4 years. So here's somebody who's just looking at it from an economic point of view and sees history and knows it's coming, right? So these, in Mosul, the tanks, they have Abram tanks. This is not an Abram, no, it's not an Abram, that's a Russian tank there. But these weapons have fallen into the hands of ISIS via Iraq. Humvees, over 2,300 of our Humvees, 40 M1A1 main battle tanks, 74,000 machine guns, as many as 52 M198 howitzers mobile guns. Thank you, the United States. That's what's done. Folks, this is a mess. This is an absolute total mess. And if you don't understand the makeup of, you don't understand the Sunni, the Kurds, and all that makeup and stuff, you're not going to understand what's going on there. But the truth of the matter is that what's getting set is what Ezekiel called the Battle of GoG and MaGoG. What is the Battle of GoG and MaGoG? The Battle of GoG and MaGoG is a coalition of nations coming down into the Middle East for what a lot of people believe is the final battle, but it's not the final battle. It's just a precursor to the tribulation period, and the powers of heaven will be shaken. And so the whole thing of it is that what we're seeing and what people are afraid of is that this world system is collapsing. It's collapsing financially. It's collapsing religiously. It's collapsing just morally. It's just bankrupt. And it's a godless system. And the UN has an Agenda 2030. And they want to implement a new world order. And climate change is right at the heart of it, because they're hoping that climate change will bring people together. It'll be the cause. It'll be the new religion. And remember, the Antichrist served a religion that neither his fathers knew. And climate change is the new religion. And so be very wary of anybody who's pushing climate change, because what they're really after is control and world domination. But it's a lie. And the thing of it is that what we're going to see is that the Holy One of Israel, as we saw in the scriptures before that is that in this passage, verse number 4 of Isaiah 47, our Redeemer, the Lord of hosts is his name, the Holy One of Israel. And in other passages it says, I will come against thee and I will not meet thee as a man. And so what we're doing is what we're seeing right now is this whole world system approaching the end of that system. And God's going to take it apart, piece by piece, in 7 years of tribulation. But during that time, and while he's taking that nation apart, the devil's going to try to set up his kingdom, his final kingdom. But God's going to utterly cast Satan out of heaven. He's going to confine him to the earth. And in the end, he's going to put him in the lake of fire. And then after 1,000 years, he's going to put in the bottomless pit. He's going to cast him into the bottomless pit. And so we need to understand these terms. You know, as we go back to the beginning of this, they're all just talking about the same thing. Times of the Gentiles, it's just a calendar. Babel is where it all began. Babylon is a country whose head was Nebuchadnezzar, who was part of that system. But Babylon wasn't really the first. Egypt was actually the first. The daughter of Babylon is just the offspring of this world system that continues to this day. The mystery of Babylon is just the religion, of that, and the woman who sits on there. The New World Order is just another name for Babylon. That's really all it is. The United Nations is just where it does its business. And GoG and MaGoG, simply all the nations of the world, Gentile nations. It's all the same thing. It's just different aspects of it. Okay? And so I just wanted to go through this. Anybody have any questions about things that you're seeing and things that are going on over there in the Middle East? And the bottom line of it is that a lot of people believe, and a lot of people are tuned into what's called the Battle of GoG and MaGoG of Ezekiel 38 and 39. And a lot of people understand that this is exactly what's transpiring before our faces right now. Now, it doesn't happen in one day. It happens over time, but the key element about GoG and MaGoG in Ezekiel's prophecy is that the king of the north, Gog, will make an agreement with the Medes and the Persians. That's Iran, right? And that exists right now. So Russia's down in there with Iran, which is Shia, with Syria, which is Shia, right? And they're controlling that area, and because Iran wants to conquer that whole area, but ISIS wants the same thing. And now Russia's down in there, and now the United States is going to come in, and France is going to come in, and Britain is going to come in. You really think this is going to work out for good? Do you realize why people are fleeing that area? The only problem is what are they bringing with them? Their ignorance, their false religion. And so as you look at these maps, and you see the mingling together of these different religions, do you understand the prophecy of Daniel? They shall mingle together, but they shall not cleave one to another. This is exactly what it's talking about. Because the different ideologies separates us. And so in the United States, with our open borders, and losing the one language which unites us, and different religious beliefs, and all these Muslims coming in, is a formula for disaster. It didn't work in the Middle East, and it's not going to work here. But our fearless leaders, they know better than us, right? They're smarter than us. They graduated from Harvard and Columbia and other astute, prestigious institutions of learning, but they're totally ignorant of the Word of God and what's really happening. And so, the few of you that are here tonight, you know this. Well, where's everybody else? I'm telling you, as a pastor, I am so frustrated with Christianity and the ignorance and the level of ignorance is being maintained by pastors, and people are just choosing to remain ignorant of this. It's going to bite you. It's going to come back. And there are a lot of people that aren't ready. And when this thing unfolds and the other shoe drops, people are going to be saying, what happened? But it's coming. I don't know the day and the hour, but I'm going to tell you something. The year 2016 has got a bullseye on it. And I'm of the opinion, and I've told my wife, you know what? I don't think there's going to be another presidential election in the United States. I think that things are going to blow up and fall apart, and martial law will be declared, and we're not going to have another election. It's possible. You already see the unrest in the streets, and that's being fed. And we've got young millennials out there, 40% of them, which want censored speech. They don't know what they're talking about. They don't know what they're giving away. And once you give away your freedom of speech, you don't get it back without blood in the streets. And so, folks, we got to speak out. We've got to warn people and say, you know, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't know what you're giving away here. But you know what? Ultimately, God's in control. And if you know the Lord Jesus Christ, it'll be fine. But in the meantime, we've got to be busy. And we've got to be informing people. And we got to tell people that this is not good. And you need to prepare yourself because this system is going to fall apart. We're $20 trillion in debt as a nation. There's no paying that off. And then there's all the derivatives and everything else and the unfunded liabilities that we have, all of that. And yeah, we have presidential candidates that have a plan and all this. I don't think any of it's going to ever see the light of day. You know why? Because there's a devil. And the devil is going to bring the nations and gather the nations for war over there in the Middle East. But God is going to intervene. He's going to intervene. He's going to save the nation of Israel. And believe me, the people in Israel are aware of what's going on. They know what's going on. I was sharing with the folks earlier in Sunday school today about this young boy, this 15-year-old that supposedly had this out-of-the-body experience. He died, and he was taken up into heaven. He came back with some message, and the message was a warning about GoG and MaGoG, about the coming of God and the battle, and millions are going to die. And even the IDF is going to be defeated. It's going to be a great conflict, and millions are going to die. Will that wake people up? I don't know. Will we be raptured by then? I think so. Do I know so? No, I don't know. What are we going to see? I hope I'm wrong about all this, but as you look at what's going on over there, it's happening right now. It is happening right now. And ISIS, it's more than ISIS, but it's these different ideologies. And you have to understand what Iran's thinking is. And what did we do as a nation when we supported Iran? Why do you think that deal went through? Because somebody wants to feed Iran and give them the money so they can maintain this war, so they can prosecute this war. But Iran isn't going to stop with the defeat with the Sunnis. They want Israel. They want Israel. Israel is surrounded. It's surrounded. And the Golan Heights, what's going on at the Golan Heights right now is that there are Sunni militias, growing on the Golan Heights, and Israel is actually bombing and destroying some of these positions on the Golan Heights. And the Golan Heights is Syria. That's what it is. It's just the doorway to Syria right there. And so watch the news and understand where all this is going. Where it's all going is the fulfillment of God's word. And one of the things that this young Jewish boy said, and you could take it for what it's worth, but he made reference to a prophecy in the book of Ezekiel about how Gog will be killed and will be buried in the land of Israel. And this is a young boy who really didn't know the scriptures, but it was told this. He's seen this. And then he said, Obama is Gog. So there are a lot of Jewish people over there that now believe that President Obama is Gog, who's going to lead the nations of the world. In fact, what he said was that 70 nations of the world will come against the land of Israel. And when you look at Obama's affiliation with the United Nations, it's not hard to imagine a coalition of nations. In fact, President Obama himself thinks that he has a coalition of 65 nations. Where are those 65 nations when it comes to fighting ISIS? And so there is something going on in the background, and there is a plan, and the devil's behind it all. But God is going to intervene on behalf of Israel, and he's going to redeem, and he's going to ultimately bring down the lady of Babylon, the mother of harlots. It's a world system. It's not the end of the world. It's the end of a godless world system. It's going to be replaced by the Lord Jesus Christ ruling and reigning from Jerusalem after the end of 7 years of great tribulation. That's what it's going to take, unfortunately, to turn a lot of people, to the truth. And I'm at the point right now is that's about it. And so this is going to come because the hearts of too many people have yet to be turned, yet to be convinced. And as the Lord looks out of heaven and he sees, and he looks out, just as he looked at Sodom and Gomorrah, and he said concerning Sodom and Gomorrah, yeah, okay, Abraham, if there's 10 righteous men, 10 righteous ones, I will not send fire on Sodom and Gomorrah. But he couldn't even find 10. I wonder what the Lord sees when he looks down from heaven, when he looks at the world, and he sees all this going on. All the persecution, all the death, all the destruction, Christians being killed, Jews being killed, innocent people from all over being killed and being targeted. Now, when is enough going to be enough? And I think we're approaching that point really quickly. But I want you to understand tonight what Babylon, the mother of harlots, the mystery of Babylon, GoG, MaGoG, the times of the Gentiles, it's all really part of one system. All right? With that, I'll conclude.